All right. Hey, everybody, we're back this week. Today, I'm sitting down with Spencer Chanley, a master of accelerating early stage startups. He's the co founder and managing director of Cardinal Ventures and the leader of the New York City chapter of Founders Boost, which is recognized globally as the premier startup pre acceleration program. Prior to his investment ventures, Spencer held roles in growth and monetization at early stages of TikTok and Be Real, and helped steer the startup Quick Place as its CSO prior to its acquisition by Fanfix. He's since become an advisor and strategist for promising early stage companies. And today we're going to dive a little bit deeply into the accelerator model. Who is it for? What could be redeveloped, and just kind of get your overall feedback. And so with that, I'm super stoked to have you. I guess my first question is, when do you think it's worth it for an early stage startup to join an accelerator? And when might it be best for a startup to focus their efforts elsewhere?
Great question. I think that's probably top of mind for everyone thinking about applying to one. First off, thank you for the very nice introduction. That was great. Hearing everything repeated back to me, always a bit weird, but that's a great start. And yeah, I think when founders are thinking about applying to accelerators, it's obviously become extremely popular to apply to niche programs, more generalist approaches. It's just a great on-ramp to, de-risk your life as a founder, have a support system around you, and obviously there's a higher success rate with getting funding and just coming out the other side unscathed, and probably with better mental health. I think it's pretty important before you consider even the type of accelerator or the accelerator name itself. I think it's important to look at the ecosystem and also inwards at what you want your company to look like from a dilution standpoint, from a culture standpoint. I think when you go into a program like the accelerator, a lot of that, obviously the price is dictated, but also, your approach to building the company is being dictated. That's super helpful for first time founders, people that come from maybe big tech prior or a larger company, and they have this passion for a problem, but maybe not the skill set to build it from 0 to 1. But you're also allowing, potentially 100 plus people made up of amazing mentors, investors, and people who have all this experience, but they're coming in and they're guiding you. For some people, that is incredible and can be the greatest resource in the world. And then others that can often derail what they were building prior. If you come in too late, it's not super helpful and you don't take advantage of the assets and the resources provided because you think you're farther along than you are. If you come in too early, you're sometimes forced to move really quickly because of the nature of, a set time period cohort. And biggest problem you have is not actually pursuing anything and building and shipping quickly. I think the nature of it with the expected growth, it can force founders' hand when they actually need more time on the product.
Mm,
But it's important to have something that you can experiment with, that you can play with, that you can show customers, use the mentorship, and look at yourself on what you want out of the program before you apply.
that's great. Um, and within that, I mean, what do you think? I mean, a lot of people go into accelerators because they need to go fundraise, or they have these really specific ideas for what an accelerator will do for them. Can you just talk briefly about what those pockets look like and generally how effective they are, and where you kind of see room for growth in the future of accelerators?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's five primary functions of a really good accelerator. You obviously have the networks that are, built on top of the accelerator. You have to have mentors, you have to have speakers, you have to have something beyond capital,
Hmm.
but it's the whole point of having an accelerator. Uh, the second is, the resources themselves. Like, are you bringing something unique to the table? Like, you're not just pulling articles from Medium, pulling tweets for your founders. Like, you have to have a curriculum that you have developed and honed, over the course of the years you've been active or even prior, that you're, giving for free as part of this value add, because generally accelerators take an increased amount of equity for the amount of capital that they're actually putting in. If you're putting in 150 to 250, and now accelerators are putting in even more, they're taking upwards of 6-7%, which if you just gave that money on its own, it would not add up. The third is the peer groups themselves. Like, you're being surrounded by founders who are going through the same issues as you, who are sometimes tackling the same problem space, especially in these niche accelerators who are going after aging care, or if you're in deep tech, if you're going after defense contracts together, and you're kind of side by side going after and helping one another. Like, there is strength in numbers, especially in the founder space where it's so isolating.
Yeah.
That is super overlooked. Fourth, obviously, capital itself. It's hard to go after an idea when you're worried about not being able to pay your bills, when you're not able to afford rent. And so the state of mind of, okay, I can use the money that they've given me, go through this program, and at the end of it, still have some money left, hopefully. I think six is probably the most important, which is knowledge sharing. So it's not just these people that are coming in and just giving you their network. Like, they have gone through it most of the time. It's ex-founders, it's current founders who have either reached unicorn status, or they've raised a Series a year and a half ago, or they're founders turned investors who've seen all paths, and they're bringing sometimes decades and decades of experience to you to take a problem that would have taken a founder 6 months to get over, and reducing it to a sentence of, don't do this, maybe try this instead. And sometimes that is just the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
And then I think the last piece is just the concentration of everything at once. You have 6 to 12, sometimes longer weeks of really concentrated information and testing, and then accumulating in this big demo day where the accelerator, hopefully does a really good job of bringing together investors that, could potentially be your first checks, people that could become your first enterprise clients, become distribution partners with you, and they're just filling that room with people that want to help you. I think the best intro to an accelerator demo day I heard recently was, find one founder that you love and that you want to help, and find one way to assist them. It doesn't have to be a check, and can be anything. And I think that's really the value of demo day, because it's not always investors.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's a mix of other founders, consultants, and hopefully investors as well. But it's just this kind of mix of people that want to be there and see what this accelerator's produced, and that's obviously a massive part of it.
That's great.
I'd say for your second question of where things are going, I think there's been a huge shift, obviously, with the combination of interest rates, with a lot of companies and a lot of firms as well having to close their shops, or they're stagnating. It's hard. There's a severe rebalancing to the respect of capital, but then also firms having to differentiate themselves to founders. I think funds are going to have to double down on portfolio support beyond bridge rounds. Accelerators, not every accelerator has an amazing alumni network. I think that has to change. I think free resources are just going to have to be aggregated and be more readily available for founders in and out of portfolios, to make certain that the value that they're providing is actually there, and the mentorship from founders who have unfortunately had to close shop will become the most amazing mentors ever, because they've been through it all, and they can provide probably the biggest source of help by going through all these.
It's interesting too because you run something called a pre-accelerator, and I'm just curious, like what YC was the new hot thing, however many years ago, and now we have something called a pre-accelerator. How does that lead into the future of what we're looking at? I mean, in the venture landscape as a whole, but really for the accelerator model, and what does that actually look like in the day to day for what you guys are building?
I mean, that's a good question. Like, why do pre-accelerators exist, and why are we doing what we're doing? Um, if you look 20 years ago, there were a handful of accelerators, even less that people could name and
Mm-hmm.
would recognize. Now there's, over, I think, 2,000 accelerators and incubators just in the US, that are just churning out startups. And the value of each of those, with everyone added, if they're not bringing something unique to the table, there's diminishing value there.
Yeah.
And it's, on both sides. It's not just, harmful on the accelerator world side, but for founders who are unaware of, the differences between accelerators and aren't taking the decision seriously of where to go next. I mean, we've seen incidents in the last 2 years of startups going through accelerators and it not having the best outcome. And I think the existence of free programs and cohorts that are on ramps that are de-risking both sides of the equation, that are providing a no fee, non-dilutive experience for founders, providing the same resources beyond capital to founders with a fund attached to it, for companies that we believe can make the next step forward, is the best de-risking mechanism you can have for other accelerators. And then sometimes our companies also just go right on to raise institutional capital, and that is with a fully pro bono program of mentors, speakers, and leaders that just want to give back to founders. And you can't really fix that. You can't trick that into happening. Like, it happens because people believe in the program and believe in the founders. And I think you need more of that with the support of capital, but it has to start with the intrinsic motivation and then bringing in the monetary support to, launch them once they really understand what's there.
Totally. I think too on the other side of the table is founders forget that funds also have to raise. Like money just doesn't come out of nowhere. And I'm curious,
Right.
there's so many emerging managers right now. What's the process like that differs from just regular standard VCs going out to get capital compared to accelerators? And what do you kind of have to prove to the investor yourself to be able to go and create your own accelerator?
Yeah, VCs, you're usually coming from another firm and you're spinning out, your own fund. You've demonstrated investing purely in startups that, have gone on and been successful. For accelerators, raising capital and getting people motivated, there's a lot of elements that you have to consider. I mean, do you have an educational program or system set up that won't crash in the middle of the cohort? Do
Mm-hmm.
you have the necessary deal flow? Like, deal flow is hard enough
Yeah.
for emerging managers and VCs to just give money to founders at much better prices. On just speaking candidly, like,
Yeah.
the value for accelerators has to be that much higher. And so you have to convince the founders, but then you have to convince LPs as well that what you're doing, you know, yields that amount of value to founders. Because if you get a bunch of capital and you raise from LPs, and then you don't have the deal flow to bring in founders that are going to return to the people that just gave you money, then you're not going to be able to raise on a pure I know what founders
Need to
I can
know.
invest in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what founders need to know, and
Yeah.
there's so much more that you have to convince an LP of in raising capital than purely raising a VC fund. And raising a VC fund is already incredibly hard, especially
Yeah.
right now.
Totally. I know I keep deviating from the questions I sent you, but I just keep getting more
Oh, I love
curious.
this. It's great.
I I mean, for the people who, do want to create their own fund or honestly create their own accelerator, how did your background get you to where you are today and what were those steps? Because you're talking about it's not just making sure you have a network of deal flow and network of people to introduce or bring on as mentors. It's so much larger than that. So what do you think you've done that's really helped shape and open up the doors for you to create this opportunity for yourself and for the founders that get to work with you?
I think I bounced around a ton, but I think to not jump around to a bunch of different reasons and kind of land on one, it was honestly just trying to be as helpful to as many people as possible without expecting anything in return. I think that's reflected in the accelerator we run,
Hmm.
which is, non-dilutive, no fee. And we're bringing in people that, just care about founders. And I bring in people that have the same motivation as me, is to help founders succeed and show them like what they can achieve. And that was really how I got every opportunity so far, was, wanting to help, wanting to be there, regardless of the monetary opportunities and the monetary opportunity in each
Yeah.
instance itself, but just trying to connect the dots. Don't just go node to node and leave everything behind. Like, never burn a bridge. Try and connect dots, connect founders to each other, connect founders to investors, and make sure that everything I'm doing is of the quality I'd expect for myself. Um, and that just bringing people together and seeing the value of community
Hmm.
um, is really just what I've tried to bring to the accelerator, what I've tried to bring the mentors to realize what they're doing for these founders, what I've tried to help the founders themselves understand what they're getting from the program, from these people that just want to help them, is probably the biggest thing I can point to.
That's great. I mean, integrity and community. And when people, I think of venture and startups, it's like so much like money driven, but at the same time, I think a huge part of why I wanted to do this interview series to begin with is that it's actually so much more than that. You just have to kind of start looking in the right places and interacting with
Yep.
folks like yourself, um, to see. And we talked about this right before, that like you can live in a world of possibility within the startup and VC community. So I know we deviated plenty from our questions.
No, that was great.
Um, okay, so in an era where resources are abundant and information is at our fingertips, some argue that accelerators aren't necessary for startup success. What do you think about this? And what do you specifically offer that goes outside of just that knowledge piece?
I would say it's actually probably true that, accelerators are not always necessary for success. You can't just look at numbers that say, startups that go through an accelerator are more likely to raise money.
Yeah,
They're more likely to grow past a million ARR. Um, that's great for the startups that are built for that, for the founders that understand the value of accelerators and understand how to extract the most amount of value. But I actually answered this question for a founder I was talking to recently who's asking, what's the best accelerator model? Like, where should I be looking? And it really depends. You know, Thinking back to basic like learning techniques, like there's a million videos on different ways to learn any given thing, but not every technique that you can learn is going to be helpful for your individual learning style. And I think the
totally.
same can be said for a founder's growth as a leader, as a person, as an operator. You know, some people are built for just going heads down on their own, building the best possible product and showing it to people and letting it grow on its own. And same can be said for maybe the product that they're building is just, it needs to be extremely technical.
Yeah.
And so having them deviate with testing, with customer success, customer discovery, trying to growth hack before it's ready can be tremendously disorienting for the founder and really bad for the business.
Yeah.
And then other people, are really people oriented and can convince anyone to buy what they're building. And so they just need help getting to those people and experimenting as much as possible. And they can put together a scrappy MVP, get it out there, and raise money and then build from the idea and the problem set that they've addressed. I think to say that, accelerators are always helpful and necessary, it's hard because it's not. I'd say for Founders Boost, we recognize that assumption is wrong in most cases. I
Mm,
think it's also wrong to assume that most businesses need VC dollars to succeed. That's a whole
totally.
different issue.
Yeah.
But Founders Boost it's free. It's non-dilutive, no fee. The only thing that we ask is if they do end up raising, and it's not a requirement, if they do end up raising, we come in at the terms that they raise at. There's no preferential treatment. There's no extreme discount on the round because of everything we did. We were doing that before we had capital attached to that. It's just, we actually have a fund that we can now invest. And so it's we built the intrinsic motivation and our motivations before we were able to invest. And
Yeah.
I think that's helped propel us, pitch the story really well, get all these people that really want to help, regardless of whether we give money to any of the founders or all the founders. And we're based globally. So if
Yeah.
you're a founder in the Netherlands, if you're a founder in Kenya, if you're a founder in Austin, Texas, like we have cohorts, we've had cohorts in 24 different global hubs. Uh, and to have that access in sometimes real, like, harder to start a company environments. When you're not based in New York, LA, Austin, SF, like
Yeah. It's hard.
it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
And so having the education there and having the resources there, regardless of location, regardless of like your problem set, because we are agnostic, um, I'm always an advocate for, free things for founders, and this is probably the best free thing beyond free money, but that's usually never going to happen. And so that's my best pitch for Founders Boost. And so every founder I say is like, if you're in New York and you're pre-seed and you want some help and want a situation where I can be hands-on, like please apply. Like I'd love to have you.
It's great. Yeah. There needs to be more of that. Again, it just comes back to integrity and community. I'm really
Exactly.
glad that I was able to meet you. It's awesome. Anything you want to leave with the people watching this, specifically for founders, maybe, going out to start their raise? It's January 3rd.
Yeah, it's 2024 will be an interesting year. We saw one of the toughest years for capital injection for
Hmm.
early stage companies at all stages. We see VC firms having to, stop their own raises because they couldn't find LPs that were going to take on risk on their, gains that hadn't been realized. There's
Yeah.
founders raising so many bridge rounds that I really hope that they're all able to, but VCs are going to have to make some decisions on whether they want to support the founders that they've already put money into, or if they want to look at first-time founders or founders that decide to wait on their first round, or are showing the metrics that they're really looking for. And those metrics have probably 5x'd.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be if you were doing a million ARR, like you could raise a Series A in 2022. Now it's like you got to have 5 million ARR and it's growing at 100% month over month, which is just like it's not great, but it's what you have to deal with. And so I always suggest like look elsewhere. Like
Yeah.
VC is amazing and it's this incredible resource, and money is helpful when you can grow and you have the levers built in. But over the last 10, 20 years, it's become 99% more affordable to start a business. The
Yeah.
emergence of all these AI companies that did raise money and have built incredible products, use them, take advantage. Like there's an entirely new tech stack now that founders that were thinking about an MVP but weren't sure how to build it, like take a month, figure out how to pull it together, be scrappy, growth hack your way into some communities, get feedback from customers, show that it's a viable solution, consider an accelerator, maybe one that's free. But VC is not the only route for startups. I think startup studios, I think accelerators, incubators, I think even debt and some interesting revenue-based financing and just alternative-based financing is going to come to light with all these issues with the VC environment right now. But there's some great stuff coming out for founders, especially pre-seed, first-time founders. Like there's a lot.
Yeah.
So I would take advantage of everything that's happening right now.
Yeah. I'm excited to kind of see what happens with venture debt. And, what's early stage now was what, Series A plus was a few years ago. So it's just, yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens because it's not what it used to be years ago. And this constant evolution is a bit chaotic. So thank you for bringing positivity and light today. I appreciate it.
I try my
awesome.
best.
Yeah. Well, great. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll chat with you soon.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.